The military career of Muhammad lasted for the final 10 years of his life when he served as the leader of the ummah at Medina. History. Muhammad spent his last 10 years, from 622 to 632, as the leader of Medina in a state of war with pagan Mecca. Muhammad and his companions had earlier migrated from Mecca to Medina in what is known as the Hijrah, following years of persecution by the Meccans. Through raids, sieges, and diplomacy, Muhammad and his followers allied with or subdued some of the tribes and cities of the Arabian Peninsula in their struggle to overcome the powerful Banu Quraysh of Mecca. They also sent out parties against Arabic-speaking communities ruled under the Roman Empire. Muhammad was believed by the Muslims to be divinely chosen to spread Islam in the world, and Muhammad ultimately permitted warfare as one aspect of this struggle. After initially refusing to accede to requests by his followers to fight the Meccans for continued persecution and provocation, he eventually proclaimed the revelations of the Quran. Permission to fight is given to those who are fought against because they have been wronged. Truly Allah has the power to come to their support. Those who were expelled from their homes without any right, merely for saying, "Our Lord is Allah," after the first battle of Badr against the Quraysh, he is reported as having said, "We have returned from the lesser jihad to the greater jihad." John Esposito writes that Muhammad's use of warfare in general was alien neither to Arab custom nor to that of the Hebrew prophets, as both believed that God had sanctioned battle with the enemies of the Lord. Lead up to armed conflict. Upon arrival in Medina, he set about the establishment of a pact known as the Constitution of Medina, to regulate the matters of governance of the city, as well as the extent and nature of intercommunity relations, and signatories to it included the Muslims, the Ansar and the various Jewish tribes of Medina. Significant clauses of the Constitution included the mutual assistance of each other if one signatory were to be attacked by a third party, the resolution that the Muslims would profess their religion and the Jews theirs, as well as the appointment of Muhammad as the leader of the state. Muslims who did not migrate were subject to increased persecution, and the threat to the life of both the Ansar and the Muslims was such that they were reported as having to sleep by their weapons all night. Abdullah bin Uabi bin Salul, who was the Madanan chief of the tribes Aws and Khazraj before Muhammad's emigration, was sent an ultimatum to either fight or expel Muhammad, or face action in the form of a military campaign that would exterminate his people, and enslave his women. Saad ibn Muadh, an Ansar, went to Mecca to learn how to perform the Umrah and there was accosted by Abu Jahl at the Kaaba, who threatened he would kill him had he not been in the company of Umayyah bin Khalaf. Saad then challenged him to commit any such folly if he wanted to court a risk to the Meccan trading caravans. As tensions escalated, the Muslims began to take defensive measures such as stationing guards around Muhammad and sending out reconnaissance patrols. The Muslims, who fled Mecca's persecution to Medina, had left all their possessions and houses in Mecca, which were unlawfully expropriated by the Meccans. This sacrifice is repeatedly mentioned in the Quran, where they are promised forgiveness and heaven. The Muslims were initially not given permission to fight. Small groups of men were only sent for intelligence gathering. Raids on Meccan caravans. The caravan raids refer to a series of raids which Muhammad and his companions participated in. The raids were generally offensive and carried out to gather intelligence or seize the trade goods of caravans financed by the Quraysh. The Muslims declared that the raids were justified and that God gave them permission to defend against the Meccans' persecution of Muslims. Muslim alliance versus Meccan alliance. By expanding their military operations and negotiating with the nomads, the Muslims had created an alliance with greater resources than Mecca alone could muster. The Meccans in their turn made alliances with Bedouin tribes. Two large alliances faced each other, poised for further warfare. Hudaybiyyah by old custom. During the months of pilgrimage, tribal hostilities stopped and all were free to visit Mecca. In March 628, Muhammad put on the garb of a pilgrim and taking a force and camels for sacrifice, set out for Mecca. According to the early chronicler Ibn Ishaq, Muhammad took 700 men. According to Watt, Muhammad took 1,400 to 1,600 men. The Meccans did not accept the Muslim professions of peaceful intent and sent out an armed party against them. The Muslims evaded them by taking a side route through the hills around Mecca, and then camped outside Mecca, at Hudaybiyyah. Ibn Ishaq describes a tense period of embassies and counter-embassies, including a bold foray by Uthman ibn Affan into the city of Mecca, where he was temporarily held as a hostage. The Meccans told the Muslims that Uthman had been killed and open warfare seemed imminent. Then the situation shifted radically. Uthman was revealed to be alive, and the Meccans expressed their willingness to negotiate a truce. Some elements wanted a confrontation, but Muhammad held out for a peaceful resolution. The Treaty of Hudaybiyyah committed both sides to a 10-year truce. The Muslims were to be allowed to return the next year to perform the pilgrimage. Muslim alliance expands free of the Meccan threat. The Muslims expanded their activities against other oases and tribes. They conquered the rich oasis of Khaybar and sent raiding parties against the Ghatafan, Murrah, Sulaim, and Hawazin. Muslims conquer Mecca less than 2 years after the Truce of Hudaybiyyah. The truce was broken by a squabble between tribes allied to the Meccans and Medinans. There had long been bad blood between the Khuzarah and the Banu Bakr bin Abd Manat, and the two groups lined up on opposite sides. The Khuzarah with the Muslims and the Banu Bakr with the Meccans. Watt says that some of the Quraysh helped the Banu Bakr ambush the Khuzarah. Shortly afterwards, a Muslim force of 10,000 men headed for Mecca. They camped outside Mecca and the usual round of emissaries and negotiations began. Apparently Abu Sufyan had negotiated, then or earlier, a promise that he and those under him would not be attacked if they surrendered peacefully. A few Meccans, from the Makhzum faction, prepared to resist. On or near January 11, 630, Muhammad sent 4 columns of troops into Mecca. Only one column met any resistance. 28 Meccans were killed and the rest of those opposing the Muslim entry fled. The remaining Meccans surrendered to Muhammad. The Meccans, even those who had been notable for their opposition to Islam, were spared. The Kaaba was cleansed of all the idols of Arabian gods, such as Herbal, which were placed in it, and the area was established as a Muslim sanctuary. While destroying each idol, Muhammad recited Quran 17-81, which says, "Truth has arrived and falsehood has perished, for falsehood is by its nature bound to perish." According to Islamic tradition, the Kaaba was built by Adam as a place of worship, and then later reconstructed by Abraham and Ishmael. Statistics. Casualties. The sum total of all casualties on all sides in all the battles of Muhammad is more than 1,000 according to the most authoritative sources, with the Battle of Mu'tah being the most costly in terms of casualties. Legacy. His efforts led to the unification of the Arabian Peninsula. Views. Muslims view that the Muslims fought only when attacked, or in the context of a wider war of self-defense. They argue that Muhammad was the first among the major military figures of history to lay down rules for humane warfare, and that he was scrupulous in limiting the loss of life as much as possible. Javed Ahmed Ghamidi writes in Mizan that there are certain directives of the Quran pertaining to war which were specific only to Muhammad against divinely specified peoples of his times as a form of divine punishment, for they had persistently denied the truth of Muhammad's mission even after it had been made conclusively evident to them by Allah through Muhammad, and asked the polytheists of Arabia for submission to Islam as a condition for exoneration and the others for jizya and submission to the political authority of the Muslims, for exemption from death punishment and for military protection as the dhimmish of the Muslims. Therefore, after Muhammad and his companions, there is no concept in Islam obliging Muslims to wage war for propagation or implementation of Islam. Hence now, the only valid reason for war is to end oppression when all other measures have failed.